Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Southern Plains Drought Status webinar. We started this webinar series in March due to the severity of the drought in the Southern Plains. Today's webinar will provide the most recent information on the drought in the region. My name is Elizabeth Waite. I'm with NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System. I'm the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for the Intermountain West and Southern Plains Drought Early Warning Systems. The National Integrated Drought Information System was established under NOAA to strengthen drought early warning systems across the nation. A core component of NIDIS's mandate is facilitating information sharing related to drought. This requires significant effort and input from many federal and state agencies to provide you with the most recent relevant drought information. Agencies that have been involved in putting together this and previous webinars include NOAA's National Weather Service, USDA, state climatologists, the National Drought Mitigation Center, the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program, universities in the region, and many others. Today's speaker is Victor Murphy. He's presenting on drought conditions and impacts for the Southern Plains region. Victor is the Climate Services Program Manager for the National Weather Service Southern Region, which comprises Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and the Gulf Coast states. During the webinar, all listeners are muted. So if you have any questions, please type it into the question box, which is on the control panel on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar screen. At the end of Victor's presentation, Victor and other experts are available to answer your questions. Also, today's webinar is being recorded, so the recording as well as a 2-page drought status synthesis from today's webinar will be available on drought.gov. And now I'm going to turn it over to Victor to give you the drought status update.
Okay, so Elizabeth, thank you. Do you see my screen there on the full screen, or my PowerPoint on the full screen there?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to do just an overview of my presentation. Basically, I'm going to go over, when the drought began, sort of when it peaked out, and where we're at right now, how we got, basically from there to here. We'll look at the peak of the drought and its impacts, what the current status is, and the outlook going forward into the rest of summer and actually even into the fall and winter. So to start, pretty much, summer monsoon, needless to say, is huge as far as annual rainfall goes in the New Mexico, southeast Colorado, eastern Colorado, or actually all of Colorado, as well as the Texas, Oklahoma panhandles and southwest Kansas. The summer monsoon of 2017 was very prodigious. As you can see from that graph here, most of northeast New Mexico, southeast Colorado, and a good chunk of the Texas panhandle, Oklahoma panhandle got 150% plus of normal rainfall for the water year 2017. So the water year runs from October 1st through September 30th. So at the end of September of 2017, quite honestly, this area was flush with rainfall, which was a good thing. But so the reservoirs were in pretty good shape, actually in very good shape, going into the fall of 2017 or October of 17. So reservoirs are in good shape, hydrologically are in good shape, and you can see that none of the 4 states or 5 states actually had any kind of appreciable rainfall deficits going into the fall. But needless to say, about the first 10 days or so, in the first 10 days or so of October, the switch got flipped. Parts of the Texas Panhandle and eastern New Mexico saw several months worth of rain in the first 10 days of October. So the graph I have here is the observed rainfall, percent of normal rainfall for the area for the month of October. And the areas there, you can see parts of the Texas Panhandle, parts of northeast New Mexico actually got 200% plus of normal rainfall for the entire month. All that fell in the first 7 to 10 days of the month. And so going into November, some areas had a little more, let's just say, reserve in the bank as far as being able to withstand drought or being able to adapt to drought or mitigate drought than others did. As you can see here, parts of southeast Colorado and parts of southwest Kansas and also southern parts of the Texas Panhandle did not share in that bountiful precip. So if or when any kind of significant rainfall deficit were to begin or precip deficit were to begin in the cold season, obviously the areas that did not get this early October bounty will be the ones most at peril. But this rainfall here in parts of the Panhandle, this was like about 5 months worth of rain, quite honestly, during the cold season. So here is the cold season rainfall. You can see from November 1 through the end of January. The drought did indeed kick in. Like I said, it began right around the first 10 days or so of October. The few spots that got the heavy rains in early October, it began maybe October 10th. For other areas that didn't get those heavy rains in early October, began probably October 1st. But either way, you can see here for November, December, January, just about the entire area, 3-month period, just about the entire area got, the brightest red here is less than 1/10 of an inch. And the second color red here is less than 3/4 of an inch. So just about our entire core drought area got less than 3/4 of an inch of precip during this, during the brunt of the cold season. And this dryness continued right on through early spring. This is January, February, March observed rainfall or precipitation. And once again, you can see here that the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandles, Northeast New Mexico, just pretty much the core area of the drought, they received less than 1/2 inch for these 3 months. So you had about a 5-month period there with areas receiving less than 1 inch of precipitation. So this chart here sort of points out the fact what I mentioned earlier, how numbers sometimes can be deceptive. This is Dalhart, Texas. This is a precipitation chart or graph for Dalhart, Texas, which is an extreme northwest part of the Texas Panhandle. The first 5 days of October, they received 4.13 inches of precip or of rainfall. And the brown line here is a normal precipitation for Dalhart starting October 1 and running through the water year into 2018. And this chart here runs to about April 15th. So this 4.13 inches they got in the first 5 days of October kept them in essence above normal, quote unquote, for the water year until about March 20th or so. And only after March 20th did they drop below normal, if you look at things from the water year perspective. But of course, if you slice and dice the numbers, deeper, like the Drought Monitor does, you'll see that basically, if you take out this 4.13 inches here, the next 6 months, so from basically October 10 through April 10, they got about 0.18 inches in 6 months' time. So this is the beauty of the Drought Monitor. You have experts on the ground, who are providing input and feedback, and sort of peeling off the layers of the onion, if you will, with regard to digging in deeper into the numbers, doing a deeper dive into the numbers. But Dalhart really was sort of the poster child of how that the first 5 days of October could really be deceptive if you were to look at, say, water year precip. I mean, that 4.13 inches in the first 5 days of the month, in essence, kept them above normal right on through for next 5.5 months or so through March 20th. So as far as the severity of the drought goes, these are a list of all the major cities in the core drought area that had their longest streak of consecutive days without measurable precip. And they all had at least the longest consecutive stretch of days without measurable rainfall or without measurable precip in at least 50 years. So Amarillo in the top left here is probably the most or worst impacted. Period of record, POR is period of record. Their period of record goes back to 1892, and since 1892, you can see their longest stretch of consecutive days without measurable precip, I'm sorry, up until this year, 75 days. Well, this year they actually went 126 days, I believe, from sometime in early October to February 16th. No measurable precipitation, 126 days. I don't think that streak will be broken in our lifetime, to be honest with you. Looking at a few other major areas, top right, Gage, Oklahoma, northwest part of Oklahoma, had 102 consecutive days, which was their second longest streak on record since 1904. Their worst since 1956. Bottom right, Albuquerque had 96 consecutive days, which is also their longest since 1956. And the bottom left, we've got Dodge City, Kansas, and they had a 53-day streak, which was their worst since 1958. So a lot of areas, that's a lot of geography, a lot of surrounding areas had similar type streaks. And basically, for that short period of time, or I say relatively short period of time, from October through February or so, when these streaks ended, this is the driest period, the driest period on record, and the driest consecutive days, without measured precip in at least 50 years for many of these locations. If there's a silver lining in it, it's the fact that this is the wintertime is generally one of the drier times of the year in this area. So the actual precip deficits did not amount to all that much. Maybe so. It's in the case of Amarillo going 126 days without measurable rainfall, without measurable precip, and October through February is probably about a 3-inch deficit. So that could be made up with a robust, spring rainfall, or earlier, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a lot of, let's just say, precip in the bank, like this area had in general going in October, it took a while for the impacts to play out. And of course, to add insult to injury, what would be drought without some good heat? This is the October through March average temperature by state, and Arizona, New Mexico had their hottest October through March on record, which is a 6-month period. Colorado was 4th warmest, and Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas were all like the top 20 or so, top 20 to 25, so about the top 20th percentile or so. And of course, this added heat obviously puts extra stress on sectors like agriculture, hydrology, and the snow drought, which we saw. So this here, real quick, shows how the U.S. Drought Monitor had its finger on the pulse, if you will, of the drought. Mid-November, actually 6 weeks into the drought, still no real drought in the area because, as I mentioned earlier, they had a lot of hefty rainfall earlier through September and early October. By mid-December, you can see the drought starting to develop. They had a lot of abnormally dry areas. By mid-January, the entire Texas Panhandle is in severe drought, or the dark brown there, which is D2. Parts of northwest Oklahoma are in extreme drought, which is D3. Mid-February, things get progressively worse. And then coming forward into March, you can see the amount of extreme and exceptional drought still increasing into April. The drought peaked in general, at least in parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, sometime between mid-April and mid-May or so. You can see the amount of D4 is a bit less, but the amount of D3, which is the lighter colored red, was actually a bit greater. And this is the most recent Drought Monitor map from this past Tuesday. And it's just 2 small areas of D4 that are left in Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. And there's a good probability that those will be gone this week when the new Drought Monitor comes out tomorrow due to recent rainfall. So you can see still the evolution of the drought. And because I do want to emphasize how, despite the fact that, if you look at rainfall for a watery year, Dalhart, Texas was actually still above normal for the water year in the middle of March, whereas the Drought Monitor actually had them in D3 or extreme drought, because as we saw from October 10th through the middle of March, had about a 1/10 of an inch of rainfall or precipitation. So some of the impacts, look at them here by state. For Kansas and Oklahoma, the biggest impacts were wildfires, which has been a recurring theme lately for these two states, unfortunately. Had one major wildfire in Dewey County in northwest Oklahoma and Woodward County on April 12th. It burned for about a week or so. Burned over 350,000 acres. The governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin, did indeed declare a state of emergency for those 52 counties. They had 1,500 head of cattle killed due to the fires. As far as agriculture goes, I looked at some of the USDA stats. In Oklahoma, in the state of Oklahoma, they had 4.3 million acres of winter wheat planted. Only 2 million acres was actually harvested, which is less than 50%. And this is the smallest area that was harvested since the early 1950s. And that abandonment rate of greater than 50% was also the greatest abandonment rate since the early 1950s. So, this drought, the combination of heat and the dryness, really devastated the Oklahoma winter wheat crop. And that's one of the things that the Drought Monitor looks at is impacts. So the agricultural impacts, just like the Drought Monitor was showing, the D3, D4 impacts were pretty much spot on. Kansas, the Kansas yield was 37 bushels per acre. Total yield was 2.7 million acres. And these are the lowest since, oops, I have a typo. That should be lowest since 2014. My bad. But you can see the core drought area was more significant in Oklahoma than in Kansas. This is the map showing the USDA secretarial drought designations. You can see all the counties and states in red are shown as being primary drought disaster declaration areas, and just about the entire state of New Mexico has that designation. Looks like almost all of Oklahoma does, maybe a county or two in the extreme northeast part of the state. And parts of, a good chunk of Kansas and the Texas Panhandle also. I mentioned the term snow drought earlier. The snow water equivalent in the Colorado and New Mexico area for mid-April was terrible. For New Mexico, it was pretty much the lowest on record. These bright red dots here, pretty much 0%. So basically, the snow water equivalent, any snow that was left, and the water equivalent of that was pretty much 0. As far as percent goes by middle of April, which should be about the peak. And you can see the same thing here for southwest Colorado. Northern Colorado fared halfway decent, but that core drought area here across the northern third of New Mexico, southern third of Colorado, and into the Texas, Oklahoma areas, you can see it really took its toll as far as the amount of snow goes, and correspondingly the snow water equivalent goes. So the amount of runoff this year from snowpack was extremely low. In the case of New Mexico, it's actually probably at record low levels. One of the results of that, these are the New Mexico, these are storage levels, the reservoir storage levels for various states in the western U.S. And surprisingly, 2 states are actually below their average reservoir storage level as of June 1st. That would be Oregon and New Mexico, but New Mexico clearly stands out as being the worst of all the states. They only have like about 55% of their long-term average stored in reservoirs right now, and that's after that very prodigious monsoon from last year. So going forward, the one state that really is under the gun as far as drought impacts becoming extremely significant if the monsoon doesn't deliver its usual summertime rainfall would be New Mexico, because of where they're at right now. The chart here shows springtime rainfall as a percent of normal. You can see basically March through May, most of this area was still dry. A few patches, a few areas in the extreme northwest Texas Panhandle, once again near Dalhart, did see some rainfall. And parts of the, excuse me, Oklahoma Panhandle, extreme northwest Oklahoma, got some rainfall. But by and large, the springtime did not offer much relief. Now, as you get into May, March and April stayed very dry, but as you get into May, there were some areas where we started to see some relief. It was a little bit spotty in nature. Obviously, been nicer to see this more widespread, but so this is for May only. You can see parts of the Oklahoma Panhandle, Northwest Oklahoma, and the Texas Panhandle. Parts of it, you know, the light blue's got 150% or greater rainfall in May. But a couple areas of concern still. You can see the Amarillo area here was still very dry. The southern part of the Panhandle, sort of the core Oklahoma drought area here, the Dewey County, and I believe Custer County, Blaine County was still quite dry. So good relief off to the north. Some of the peripheral areas did not get much precip. And of course, southeast Colorado, northeast New Mexico was really hit or miss. Some areas, I believe it's in northern Quay County, got some decent rainfall. Other areas, needless to say, did not. So this sort of manifests itself in the current 7-day stream flows for Colorado, New Mexico. This is 7-day average stream flows as of yesterday, or as of Monday. But you can see the northern third of New Mexico, the darker reds are bottom 10% this time of year. The bright reds are like lowest on record. So you can see the Pecos River from Tucumcari northward is really in bad shape. Same thing for the upper Rio Grande. You know, combination of lack of snowfall, snowpack, lack of runoff from the snow, and lack of precip in general. The Animas River here in the northwest part of the state, or the San Juan River here, I'm sorry, is also very, very low. The same thing here in Colorado, the western half of Colorado. You can see, but almost every gauge point here is in the bottom 10%. A few spots here, you know, with the bright red are the lowest on record. So the monsoon, bottom line is the summer monsoon cannot come fast enough for Colorado and New Mexico. So looking at Amarillo earlier, since I mentioned them, looking at the winter and springtime period starting December 1st or running through into May, the green line here is their 2017-2018 rainfall. They had like about 1.03 inches. Normal should be, I believe, about 7 inches or 6.5 or 7. So about 15% of normal precip. And you can see that it was just slightly above 2010, 2011. The red line here is 2010, 2011, which was not a good year for drought in Texas at all. So the thing about 2010, 2011 is it continued multiple years, and so far here in this event here, we're just basically, you know, about 8 months into the event, and we're starting to see some relief. The next, other than 2010, 2011, and this year, you can see where the next driest year was, which is 65, 66. So these 2010, 2011, and this year are pretty much sort of in a league of their own, if you will, with regard to dryness. So what can we expect? So basically, we're in a good time of year for relief, and this is where climatology comes in, and knowing, you know, when it's supposed to rain. You know, one of the key things in coming out of drought or avoiding a multiple year drought is basically getting rainfall when you're supposed to get it. And so I've got here some precip traces. I got the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle up here. And the red graphs here is the average 30-year average rainfall from 1981 through 2010. You can see here for the Texas Panhandle, May, June, July, August are clearly the 4 wettest months of the year. Actually, June is the wettest. So recent rainfalls in that area are good news, but hey, it was supposed to happen. And so it did by and large. So there is got the precip, as we'll see later. Should be seeing, you know, some decent drought improvement. Areas that missed out, obviously not good news, although perhaps maybe July or August could still help them. As I was mentioning earlier, the fact that this area got so little rainfall in basically say November through April was the bad news. But the good news is you can see the average rainfall totals for each month. They're basically less than an inch. So if you got just say a half inch of rainfall over this 6-month period, it'd be maybe 3 inches total. You know, so if you got a half inch of rainfall, so your total deficit would only be about 3 to 4 inches because the monthly average rainfall is not that much. Oklahoma Panhandle, this is Climate Division 1, which covers Oklahoma Panhandle. Same thing, June is our wettest month, but you can see once again, May through August in general are the wettest months. So Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, very similar in that regard. This is when it should be raining, and it is. Colorado, southeast Colorado and northeast New Mexico, a little bit different story. Their peaks are later. You can see they have a very distinct peak July and August. Pretty much all monsoon driven, and that's why the upcoming monsoon is going to be huge for New Mexico and Colorado as far as getting the stream flows back up and helping to replenish the reservoirs. You can see here in the case of northeast New Mexico, their January precip didn't even register near zero. You can see how dry it was February, March. April picked up a little bit, May picked up a little bit, but still below normal. So obviously this is the time of year we need to start getting the precip. So here is June. We saw May was a bit spotty on the improvement or on the rainfall. June has been quite plentiful in the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles and northwest Oklahoma. Widespread areas of 4 inches plus. The 4-inch area is the dark brown. 5 inches and above is the reddish area. So you can see a lot of these areas here in northwest Oklahoma, in the core drought areas, in Oklahoma Panhandle, and northern Texas Panhandle. A lot of these areas got 4 to 5 inches, some locally more. There's looks like Beaver County here may have had over 10 inches in the first, 25 days or so of June, and a few spots here along the Kansas-Oklahoma border that also got some pretty plentiful totals. So some areas have seen drastic improvement. Other areas in the periphery of the drought, looking no further than southwest Oklahoma or along the Red River, say from Wichita Falls area out to about Childress or so, have not shared in the bounty. You can see some heavier precip swaths went south of them, and heavier rain by and large stayed north of them.
Hey, Victor.
Yes.
This is Doug. Hey, you might want to just comment that this rainfall, these colors on here are sort of the opposite of what you'd see on some of the other rainfall colors, being that the red is a lot of rain and the blue is actually not much, which is sort of counterintuitive.
Right. Well, the scale's here on the right-hand side. So same map here, but this is a percent of normal rainfall, and this was a little bit more intuitive, Doug. Maybe I should have just shown this map instead. This is a percent of normal rainfall for the month of June through June 26th through yesterday morning. And the same areas I mentioned, you can see you got 200% plus of normal rainfall. The lighter blues here are all 150% or greater of normal rainfall. So you can see the western half of Kansas really did very, very well in June, as did northwest Oklahoma and most of the Texas Panhandle. And like we said, we would expect that. This is our wettest time of the year, and the normal climatology did deliver. As I showed earlier, southeast Colorado and most of New Mexico still waiting on the monsoon to provide them some relief. An early season remnants of Hurricane Bud or Cyclone Bud tracked up northward out of Baja California during the month of June. Very unusual, and they actually did provide some good relief to central, the lower Rio Grande Valley from Albuquerque southward. So the remnant Eastern Pacific tropical cyclones, whose remnants move into the southwest U.S., are also a big part of the monsoonal precip when they do occur. And like I said, to have one occur in June was very unusual, and just sheer happenstance, but it was very fortuitous that it curved up northeastward and did bring some good rainfall to the Durango area. I think it helped extinguish that 416 fire out there, or at least made a major dent in it. But once again, of concern, you can see parts, that same area here along the Red River, and actually parts of North Texas have been very dry through June. So, sort of, that's the way drought works, sort of playing whack-a-mole. As one area improves, other areas in the periphery, sometimes tend to get worse. And I think going forward, as far as Texas, Oklahoma goes, this area here is certainly something to keep an eye on. So as far as impacts right now going forward, we saw how bad the winter wheat crop was. You can see 62% of the Oklahoma's winter wheat crop is in very poor condition as of June 24th. Texas was at 50%, Kansas 46%. And going forward, I think next big crop is going to be cotton out in this area. And unfortunately, 30% of the Texas cotton crop is already very poor to poor. And 15% of Oklahoma is in the same boat. So going forward, what do we have to look for? Good news is that all signs point toward a robust summer monsoon, especially for the Mexico-Colorado area. This is the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, monthly outlook for July. And you can see there's a big bullseye of above normal precipitation targeted here over the Four Corners area, which needs it desperately. So a 50% plus chance of above normal precip for the July time period in this area, about a one-third chance of say near normal precip, which means only about a 17% chance of below normal precip. So in general, the odds are tilted about 3-to-1 in favor of wetter than normal in this area here, as opposed to drier than normal. And also for the surrounding areas here, equal chances is not bad for July. I mean, basically, if they get near normal precip or have a 50-50 chance of, above normal, near normal to above normal precip, that should be good news because it still is one of the wetter times of the year. Looking out longer, this is for this is for July, August, September. So this covers really the peak of the monsoon. And you can see once again that there is good area of above normal precip forecast to occur or increased probabilities of above normal precip across the southwest U.S. and pretty much equal chances for the surrounding parts of the drought-stricken areas. So no dry signals jumping out at us at all, for this area through September. One bit of caution would be the temperatures. You can see what, as has been the case, usually, especially in the southwest U.S., a very strong tilt or probability for above normal temperatures, which puts a lot of stress on groundwater and surface water. A lot of water gets lost due to evaporation. The seasonal drought outlook pretty much shows the same thing. Drought is expected to still remain. Of course, we're, a lot of these areas are D2, D3, even D4. So we'll have some drought, but it should improve. In other words, the impact of severity of drought should improve here across all of Colorado, all of New Mexico, most of Texas Panhandle, and most of northwest Oklahoma. That dry area I showed along the Red River is forecast to pretty much persist, and perhaps even some drought develop further south. So going forward, I think the main message would be improving conditions here across a lot of the current core drought areas, especially by the end of August or September, by the time the monsoon ends, but perhaps some drought developing more south into Texas. And that's something we'll keep an eye on going forward. Here are some of the models. This is the latest. This is the National Weather Service CFSV2. It stands for coupled forecast system. And this is the forecast for the month of July on the left, August on the right. You can see strong probability again of above normal precip for New Mexico, Colorado for both these months. July not looking too good for Texas. And with this will come heat in Oklahoma. But hopefully, perhaps here by August, maybe a sign from the enhanced monsoon, but at least the panhandle parts of Texas or West Texas, western Oklahoma are forecast to be above normal for rainfall. So you can see where the improvement for it comes from, or at least the optimism for the improvement. And the last slide also, going forward even more, I haven't mentioned the word El Nino or La Nina yet. the CPC, or Climate Prediction Center, did issue a El Nino watch a few weeks ago. Basically, there's a 60% or greater chance of El Nino conditions developing during the fall, September, October, November, and the probability of El Nino continuing through the cold season actually increases up to near 80% by February, March, April. And this should bode pretty well for Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, since there's a pretty high correlation between El Nino years and increased cold season precipitation in these areas. So I would think the odds of another snow drought in the areas that got it this year probably be lessened dramatically. Not zero, but I think the probability or the chance of it occurring would be a lot less next year on the assumption that this El Nino does develop and occurs. So in summary, the Texas-Oklahoma drought pretty much peaked in early to mid-May. As climatological wet season arrived, impacts have been diminishing. Still want to throw caution to the wind, though, as far as areas in the periphery of the core drought area, southern part of the Texas Panhandle, southwest Oklahoma, Red River, upper Red River Basin. There's still sort of tap dancing on the edge of not seeing improvement that the other parts of the state got. As the wetter months continue, we should still keep on seeing slow but steady improvement, although it's a little bit spotty right now. Could be more widespread to make us feel better. Still concerns existing for the upcoming cotton crop and pastures. New Mexico and Colorado should be seeing the drought peak right about now. The summer monsoon should be kicking in by the first week of July. And all the forecasts that we're seeing call for it to be a robust monsoon. And so going forward, they should see some good improvement. This area gets about 40 to 50% of their yearly precipitation in this 3-month time period between July and September. And then lastly, the El Nino coming in or forecast to develop by this fall, and then becoming even more likely into the cold season during the wintertime, should greatly diminish the chances for another snow drought this upcoming cold season. And so, Elizabeth, that's my last slide. I'll kick it over to you, and if you have any questions, if anyone has any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Victor. That was a great presentation and a huge amount of very useful and detailed information. So folks on the line, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box there in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on your screen. And if you have questions after the webinar for Victor, please go ahead and email him. His email address is up on the screen. The webinar will be synthesized into a 2-page status update, and that will be posted on this address here on your screen, www.drought.gov. And also the webinar recording itself will be available on drought.gov. If you're interested in the slides that Victor showed, please go ahead and email me, elizabeth.waite@noaa.gov. We will likely have another drought status webinar, and the date of that is to be determined. So I will send out invitations to everybody who attended this webinar, and anyone else, if you know anybody who's interested, just have them shoot me an email, elizabeth.waite@noaa.gov. Happy to put them on the invitation list to receive invitations for the webinar in the future. I'm not seeing any questions right now. I don't know if anyone else as panelists would like to add anything or raise any points following Victor's presentation. I'm not hearing anything. I don't see any hands either.
Yeah, I got a question. Victor, I might have missed it. Did you go over the 8 to 14 day outlook at all?
No, but I can, Doug. Hold on just for a second here.
Yeah, that's usually a sort of a key period that it's a key period that people may want to look at a little bit closer in the near term for near term information, as well as the QPF over the next 7 days. I'm sorry, the accumulated precipitation that is possible for the next 7.
Here is 8 to 14 day forecast, Doug. And it's pretty much pretty similar.
Oh, go ahead.
It's pretty similar. If I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if my screen's still up, but
too, sorry.
You can see it's pretty similar to July outlook. Once again, increased probability of above normal rainfall for the here you go. Increased chances for above normal rainfall across most of New Mexico, Arizona, and pretty much equal chances or near normal for the surrounding areas. So during the wettest time of the year, which is pretty much the case right now for this area in here, getting near normal rainfall is a good thing. If it rains when it's supposed to rain, you really tend to avoid these long-term multi-year droughts. It's when it doesn't rain when it's supposed to rain that things get bad quick or persist for a long period of time quickly, which was the case for Texas and Oklahoma back in 2010, 2011, right on through 2013 or so.
What about soil moisture? I don't know if you want to show some indication of that, if that's of interest to anyone. And the other thing I'll say about the 8 to 14 day outlook in terms of temperature is it's predicted to be somewhat above normal, which of course adds more evaporative stress, evapotranspiration stress on plants, animals, and everything else across almost the entire U.S., but definitely across the Southern Plains. I'm sorry, this is Doug Cluck from NOAA as well.
Yeah, so here is this is a experimental product here. It's evaporative demand drought index. It shows basically a combination of stress, soil moisture, and stress on soil moisture based on increased evaporation, due to lack of precip and/or heat. And looking here for the last month or so, you can see in general some of the peripheral areas that missed out on the heavy rainfall still showing some stress, but by and large, looks like pretty good improvement to here across the panhandles and most of New Mexico. Colorado's still hurting, but hopefully the monsoon coming in will improve them. I think Tropical Cyclone Bud really had a positive impact for central and southern and western New Mexico.
We do have a comment here from Scott Bright who's the fire weather analyst with the Texas Interagency Coordination Center. He wrote that fire danger is increasing in the Cross Timbers region of north central Texas to the hill country and parts of central and northeast Texas. High Plains and Trans-Pecos is in better shape. So that's good to know about the fire danger increasing in some parts of Texas. Thanks, Scott.
Hey, Victor, would you bring up the next 7 days of QPF, please?
So here is the 7-day precip forecast, and in general, not a whole lot. The big deluge pretty much already occurred. The light green here is less than 1/10 of an inch. The next level of green here is about 1/10 to 1/4 inch, and the darkest green here is 1/4 to 1/2. So in general, it looks like the next 7 days should be on the dry side.
Thank you.
A few other folks commented that it was a great presentation and very informative. So thank you, Victor, again for the level of detail and all the information you shared. Did anyone else have any questions or comments? And please let us know if there's any particular information you would like to hear on future webinars, any topics, anything that you want more detail on. We welcome your feedback to make sure the webinars meet your needs. And I don't see any further questions. So if you didn't have anything to add, Victor or Doug or any of the other panelists, I think we'll sign off for the day.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I see here, and maybe you addressed it already, but I see here where Dr. Holman's got his hand up, I believe, or got a question. I don't see the question. Maybe I have you unmuted, Dr. Holman, if you want to go ahead and speak. Okay. Maybe his question's on the question bar. And Benita, I see what Benita Martinez.
Very informative. That's all I see from Dr. Holman.
Okay. And I guess Benito Martinez has a hand raised. Let me go ahead and unmute. Benito, go ahead.
Yeah.
Benito, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So on the temperature curve that you showed, it showed a 30-year average, and I was just wondering why 30 years was selected, especially when some of the the hotter temperatures were shown in the 30s and 50s and that type of thing. 21.
Yeah, NOAA basically is the generally accepted practice, excuse me, for the World Meteorological Organization, and NOAA basically is to use a 30-year average temperature and recalculate those every 10 years. So it's sort of a rolling 30-year average, which gets updated every 10 years. So right now we're using 1981 through 2010 as the time period which we compare averages for.
This is John Nielsen Gammon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A comment on Texas temperatures. We looked at them for a study on the 2011 drought, and it just so happens that summertime normals for 1981 to 2010 are almost exactly equal to the long-term averages for the entire 20th century. So it really doesn't make much difference.
Right.
And this is Becky, and can I chime in too?
Yes, please go ahead, Becky.
I have noticed in some areas that if you don't use the most recent 30 years, it's just always going to look warmer, apparently with the exception of Texas. But the most recent 30 years does help regulate it a little if you use the entire period, which did, even if it had the really warm periods of the 30s or 50s, it would still just look like every month would be forecast warmer than average. And since we're close to the end of this decade, I'm already noticing that with the warming we've been seeing over the last 8 years, almost all of our months are forecasted to be warmer than average because that average is almost 10 years old now.
Yeah, and just to pile onto that, often when there is very little skill, the forecasters who look at these sort of monthly and seasonal outlooks, especially in the summertime, have to rely on trend, and so trend. They often say this little saying: "Trend is your friend," but trend tends to be the only forecast skill we have during some periods when predictability is just very, very difficult for the models. So that's another reason, especially in the Southwest. Southern part of the country, you see some of these warmer predictions for warmer, which tend to pan out often.
Yeah, the trend in the Southwest U.S. has been for steadily increasing temperature. That's probably been the one part of the United States that's had the most consistent warming signal, other than the Alaska and the North Pole area. But as far as the CONUS goes, the Southwest U.S. I think has far and away the strongest warming signal. I'm not sure if it's exactly what's causing it, but that's been the case. Like Becky pointed out also, and John, When the new 30-year normals are released in 3 years from now, so the 1991 through 2020 normals should be released probably sometime in 2021, which is a mere 3 years away. I feel pretty confident to say, and John or Becky, y'all can chime in, that the new normals will be at least slightly warmer than what they are right now.
Maybe we should just let listeners know that John is John Nielsen Gammon. He's the Texas State climatologist, and Becky is Becky Bollinger, the Assistant State Climatologist for Colorado. And then I think Doug's voice was in there. Doug Cluck is with NOAA. And Victor, of course, was talking.
Yeah, I agree with that, Victor.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. That was useful information. I appreciate it.
There's a question here from Carl Suler. Are there historical analog periods of interest, say 1950?
I'll go first, and I'll pass the baton to John. I don't think that the 1950s would quite compare to this list, due to the duration of the drought in the 50s. That was a 3-year to 5-year drought so far. It's been very extreme in this area, but it's only been about 8 months or so, and it's been generally during the drier time of the year. So in that regard, I would say no, it's not a good analog. And I think maybe a better analog going forward would be to look for years perhaps with weak El Ninos coming forward. At least from this point going forward, we did have 2 weak La Ninas the last couple of years. I think that's probably helped bring some of the droughty type conditions to this area. But I think comparing it to the 50s right now, I think it's still very premature. John?
Yeah, you didn't talk long enough for me to gather some useful data on that one, so talk some more.
While John is gathering data, this is Doug again, Victor. Some have said that the drought never ended from 2011. So what we could have is a period of 10 or 20 years of general dryness. We could be in the middle of that, with interspersed years of very wet. So, this is one of the things that climatologists wrestle with all the time. First of all, we wonder why it's happening, of course, and we have all kinds of theories on why. But people will relate it to a Pacific decadal oscillation or some other teleconnection, which we won't get into right now. But it's interesting to look at, if you will, longer term trends in terms of dryness and wetness. And you could make a case in the Southwest, for example. Everybody's looking at the reservoirs when they were full a number of years ago, and never have been full again. And in fact, are slowly declining over time. There's reasons for that, lots of reasons for that. Same could be said perhaps for the southern plains, portions of the Southern Plains, I should say. And now I think John will give us the final answer, because
absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. Thank
you. Yeah, there's actually a useful tool here called the Southern U.S. Drought Tool that's produced by the Southern Regional Climate Center. Uses technology that was actually originated at the Oklahoma Climate Survey. And you can, the URL for that, which Victor can put up on the screen, is drought.srcc.lsu.edu. And it lets you look at drought conditions by climate division across any state in the southern United States. And it not only displays how it ranks compared to normal, but it also shows what the most similar analog year was given current drought at that time scale. And the ones that popped up, the ones I had time to look at for say the Texas Panhandle, 1995 to 96 was the closest analog for the what's happened over the past 6 months. For the Oklahoma Panhandle, 1998 to 99, and for Northeast New Mexico, 1988 to 89. So it really varies depending on what you're looking at. Neither of them are particularly extreme at this point, thanks to the recent rains we've had.
Can I comment on Southeast Colorado?
Sure, I didn't have time to get to it.
I just, I was looking up on NOAA's Climate at a Glance page and kind of did a historical time series of the Palmer Z index, which is an estimate of drought given temperature and precipitation conditions. And this most recent period, starting from October and going through May, does look to be kind of similar to 1950, but the worst pops out as being 2002 for Southeast Colorado. And then this one is definitely ranked up there, similar to 1950. So I would say on the short term, just looking at the last 7-8 months, for the Arkansas Basin in Southeast Colorado, it's a pretty similar comparison between now and 1950.
Yeah, but the key vector will be the duration. Once again, at least in Texas, the drought of the 50s started about 1950, as you said, and lasted around through 56. So it was a significant long-term drought. And so
Correct.
far,
and what Doug said also needs to be taken note. While last year was particularly wet for Southeast Colorado, there have been more periods of dry conditions in Southeast Colorado prior to this than there were prior to the 1950 drought, where there was a extended wet period in the 40s.
Right. Getting back to Benarito's earlier question, this graph here, this is also from the folks at SCIP, which John mentioned. The URL would be here's the URL right here: drought.srcc.lsu.edu. But this is for the state of New Mexico as a whole. Going back to Benarito's question, so here's your 30-year average temperature. This thick horizontal line looks like it's 53.1, and the blues and the reds are 5-year rolling averages compared to that 30-year long-term average. And anyway, you can see since about 1990, early 1990s, New Mexico's had a huge warming trend. In fact, the lighter gray lines in individual years, it looks like the last time the state of New Mexico as a whole had a below normal year for temperatures back in 1997. So it's been 20 plus years since New Mexico's had a entire year with below normal temperatures. So I feel very confident to say that the next 30-year average temperatures in New Mexico will be definitely warmer than the current 30-year normal, which has a lot of impacts. As John did a great job here in Texas, this leads to increased evaporation from surface water. We had a New Mexico drought working group conference call yesterday. I believe Santa Rosa Lake or Lake Santa Rosa, which is on the Pecos River, lost about 10,000 acre-feet of water in May, and our last 30 days or so, that was entirely due to evaporation. So the water loss, as temps get warmer, even if precip stays the same, as temperatures continue to warm, water loss due to evaporation is going to continue to increase. And if you get a drought or a dry period, it's going to increase dramatically. Big issue for long-term planners, big issue for water managers, big issue for communities that want to be, adapt and be resilient to drought and climate variability.
Excellent. Thank you, Victor. So I don't see any other questions. So I think we'll finish up the webinar for today. And we look forward to hearing from you guys about any other information needs you have. And we'll reach out to you and let you know about the next Southern Plains Drought Status webinar. Thanks for joining today, and thanks very much, Victor, for your presentation, and Becky and John and Doug and everybody who provided additional information. We really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye.